nervous system, pulling somebody from fight or flight to rest and digest. And it's really cutting edge stuff. China, Japan is part of their culture. Hand them a glass of water. Just understand these things and how we can use these things for ourselves and others. But how do we not go on that roller coaster ride in the first place? We'll talk about that in a minute. That's important. We'll get there. But folks, just real quick, look what else is happening up here in condition life. Loss of peripheral vision, loss of depth perception, loss of near vision. You lose in fine motor control. Is it really any surprise? One place fine motor control goes is the eyes. Here's where it gets really interesting. Auditory exclusion. The vast majority of people in combat, the shots are very muted. Now, how many hunters we got here? Where are my hunters? Come on, there's lots of hunters here. Yeah. Hunters, you ever notice something? Take your rifle to the range, fire one shot without hearing protection, your ears are gonna ring. You shoot a deer, it's a still, calm morning. Boom! People a mile away hear the shot. Hunters, what do you hear? Nothing. Folks, that is a response to shooting a deer. How much more so if the deer were shooting back? Those shots get muted in combat, and you need to know. Folks, it was 22 years ago. A state trooper came up to me. He said, now I understand. He said, it's so embarrassing, now I understand. So me and my partner on a one-car roadblock. This guy blows the roadblock 100 miles an hour. We pull for a shot, we leap out of the way. I get him ready, I call the Sarge. Sarge, he's blown the roadblock. Sarge says, pursue. He says, we can't. Why? We got bad ammo. You can barely hear the shots. You know, when you're hunting, you generally hear nothing. In combat, it is very muted. They thought there was something wrong with their ammo. I want you to think about this. 500 years of gunpowder combat. And 2 state troopers failed to pursue a fleeing felon. Because after 5 stinking centuries of gunpowder combat, nobody warned them what to expect. Why would you start learning this stuff? Well, we're getting pushed so hard. You know, in 2011, was a U.S. Marshals Fugitive Apprehension Task Forces. Had marshals being murdered left and right. Had more marshals killed any year in the Marshal Service, more than the previous 10 years put together. The following year, the Marshals Service, Marshals Fugitive Task Forces had no marshals murdered. Would go from a record to none the next year. What'd they do? Well, they learned. And they transformed their tactics and their training and their techniques. Folks, we get better and better or we die. Also, you can't learn this stuff in peacetime. Shame on us who've been at war 18 years, we ain't learned nothing. What I want to show you, what I think are the 2 most important things we have learned in all these years of war. Number 1, this is huge. If it works in the Olympics, if it works in the Super Bowl, it works when somebody's trying to kill you. Now, I was a West Point psychology professor in the early 1990s, and they said, you are smart guys, got brand new shiny degrees, the hand-picked smart guys, give us smart stuff. We'll get it straight up to the generals. We said, look at all this sports psychology, performance psychology. We got to use this stuff in combat. The generals, older and wiser heads, had a good answer. No. Just because it works in some stupid game doesn't mean it works when someone's trying to kill you. We had a lot of people say that sports stuff goes out the window, someone's trying to kill you. We didn't know. Well, in 18 years of war, we've systematically experimented, and primarily with the most elite units. Our Tier 1 Spec Ops were the first ones. We have systematically experimented. In 18 years of war, we can tell you without a doubt, it works. This is huge. If it works in the Olympics, if it works in the Super Bowl, it works when somebody's trying to kill you. This means we can strip mine the multi-trillion-dollar field of performance psychology and apply it to life and death events. So folks, one of my books is this warrior mindset, mental toughness skills for a nation's peacekeepers. The guy that did all the heavy lifting in this book was Dr. Mike Aspens, Pennsylvania State Police psychologist, also one of our nation's leading trainer, pro ball teams, Olympic athletes, especially about mental toughness. Great resource. And you know, it's kind of funny, we stole this from the sports world, yeah? But now the coaches are taking this and saying, hey, here's what this spec ops guys are doing, right? So it goes back and forth. But I want to show you another book here, and I'm sorry I'm sold out of this book. Go online, get a copy. You'll be glad you did. This is the best book I've written in 30 years. Oh, says it right there. Best book I've written in 30 years. What do you think? Folks, the authors of this book are a husband and wife team. They're both world championship shooters and coaches. He's a combat veteran. They're law enforcement trainers. They're hunters and hunting guides. Secrets of mental marksmanship. You could use this for your kid's soccer team. You could use this for any area of human endeavor. But they make it come alive with 4 case studies. And for every aspect of performance site, they give a police, a military, competition, and hunting example that makes it come alive. Amazing book. If I could steal one book on the planet, put my name on it, call it back, this would be the one. And again, this is already claimed, we don't have any available. But the other thing we learned in all these years is the incredible value of stress inoculation. If I want to inoculate you against a disease, inoculate you against the disease. What I do, I expose you to that disease in a controlled manner. The real thing comes back will not kill you. If I want to inoculate you against a stressor, what do I have to do? Expose you to that stress. Last year's flu vaccine, don't buy it for this year. So if you're a firefighter, what do you have to face in training? Real burning out with red fire. Can we all agree you cannot train a firefighter for a lifetime with flickering red lights and some red tissue paper, yeah? Fire guys got to face real burning out with fire in their training. Well, what do cops and military have to face? Real burning out with bullets. Our simulation, paint bullet, force-on-force type training is one of the greatest leaps forward in performance since gunpowder. Folks had the honor of writing forward the book, Training at the Speed of Life. The author of this book is Ken Murray, one of the smartest guys on the planet with the interest in simulation. Airsoft is good, paintball is good. UTM probably doing a better job for a better price than simulation. But folks, basically when we look at our gold standard, airsoft and paintball is like the 50% solution in fraction of press. But in simulation, UTM type of stuff, you've got a real gun in your hand. You pull the trigger, there's a flash in a bag. What leaves the barrel is not a chunk of lead, but a plastic marking capsule. It leaves the barrel 350, 400 feet per second. If it hits you in the hand, does it hurt? That's good. Get it in, it's good. The firefighter has to face real burning out with fire. We face real burning out with bullets. NYPD, 35,000 gun killers. They put this force-on-force scenario-based training in place. Today, and the following year, NYPD fired half as many shots and got 3 times many hits. Now this is with the N of 35,000. They get 3 times many hits with half as many shots. Today, the state of New York says you are negligent to give anybody a firearm, not giving this force-on-force, reality-based scenario type training. NYPD's academy was always 40 hours of firearms. That was my academy, 40 hours of firearms training. Now it's 80 hours, and the second 40 hours are all force-on-force scenarios. LAPD's even gone further than that, and all the extra time is force-on-force scenarios. I want to give you a case study that'll make it come alive. Orlando, Florida. A mom parks her minivan in the garage, leaves 2 little kids in the van, the minute goes in the house. Armed home invaders take mom hostage. When the kid's in the van, takes mom's cell phone out of her purse, dials 911, said, "Bad guy's got my mom. Can your little sheepdog pick up your cell phone, dial 911, and give their address?" It's the first survival skill every kid should have. And he did, and cops are responding, and the one of the responders was Deputy Jennifer Fulford. Jennifer told me if RoboCop shoves his head in the van and says, "Come with me, kids," you peel him off the ceiling. She said one of our female warriors says, "Come with me, kids," there's a good chance they will. It's just something we bring to the table the guys can't. And Jennifer said they weren't sure what was going on, but Jennifer said, "I'll go in the garage and get the kids." The Deputy Jennifer Fulford goes in the garage one direction. 3 armed home invaders come in the garage from the other direction. And the gunfight that follows, Jennifer will be shot 10 times. 3 bullets has top of body armor equipment, 7 punch through the body. Early in the gunfight, Jennifer's right arm is disabled by bullet. She drops gun to the right hand, picks her left hand, and kills the SOB that shot her. It's only Non-dominant hand, one-handed, sucking up slugs, precise accurate fire. While the other one's sinking slugs in her, Jennifer does a left-handed, one-handed reload under fire and kills the other one. Game over. Third one, wisely, runs like elevator springs. Jennifer's been shot to bits. Both legs pretty disabled, properly cut the wall, one arm disabled. Got about one front fingernail, two bleeding out and dying bad guys. Gun smoke, shell casings, screaming kids. The whole thing took seconds. The whole thing just took seconds. Another cop comes rushing in, gun in hand, says, Jennifer, you okay? She said, I'm like, no. Get me out of here. Steely calm, precise accurate fire, left-handed, one-handed reload under fire. How do you do that? Well, Jennifer Fulford was in my class a year later. She was fully recovered and back on the job a year later. She got married 6 months after the incident. She said she's a glutton for punishment. And folks, the most famous gun of the Old West, Wyatt Earp, OK Corral? Wyatt Earp needed Doc Holliday and two brothers to take out 3 bad guys at the OK Corral. Jennifer did it all by herself. Like most heroes, she's very humble, and she's got a very important point. She said, I am a product of my training. We did our paintball at Force on Force training. I was hit and hit and hit, and it hurt. My trainer said, don't you stop. We don't give you permission to die. We don't train you to fail. Keep going. They drilled me, and take a bullets and driving on. They drilled me, and left-handed, one-handed reloads, and here's the magic words. She said, when the real thing happened, it was less stressful than the first time I did it in training. And folks, that's the definition of stress inoculation. When the real thing happened, it was less stressful than the first time I did it in training. Another thing that messes our young cops up, dead people can mess young cop up pretty bad. Well, what a human body, what's it smell like? Shit, vomit, piss, blood, all mixed together. Hunters know this smell. Hunters, you gut it game from the youngest days, and it means food on the table. One of many reasons why hunting is an incredibly valuable resource to prepare for combat. But there's a generation that never seen, let alone smelled, what's inside a living creature. At the first time they encountered that, some horrible crime scene, some terrible accident scene, we set them up for failure. What we're doing is every young cop, very early on, must go to an autopsy. Better yet, spend a whole day in the morgue and be in an autopsy and see the blood and the stuff inside living creatures in a sterile clinical environment. Then when that terrible crime scene, accident scene comes up to a certain degree, they've been inoculated. One of the most powerful tools we're using nationwide is to wear the sleeve, wear the suit, and get hit by our dogs. Now, folks, I'm kind of doing it. This is a very unique group and a ratio. How many people have ever worn the suit been bit by our working dogs? Yeah, an unusual number. That's about the average I would get from a whole audience of cops. And that's just good for you folks. But I don't care who you are, I don't care who you're training with, you know they're not really going to kill you. It's a game. He's not going to jail, he's not going to lose his job. He's playing, you're playing. Deep in your gut, you both know this is a game. When you wear that suit and that dog comes at you, you're looking right dead in the eye of raw gut. I'm going to rip your throat out and like an aggression. When that dog came in the first time, I go, whoa, it's like airborne school, jumping out the door the first time. The next time, no big deal. That's where you want to be. Look raw, pure, animal hate in the eyes. And be completely unbothered. And so this is stuff we're doing. People say, I don't get bit by my dog. Well, we'll go back to the dog in a few minutes. Let's look at one last thing that's happening up here in conditioned lab. Just one last thing. Voiding of bladder and bowels. Voiding of bladder and bowels. If you have a load in the lower intestines, extreme survival stress is probably going to go. Your body says bladder control, I don't think so. Sphincter control, we don't need no stinking sphincter control. Hold the balance. So one major survey, World War II, major survey, World War II, approximately 20% of the troops would admit they'd messed themselves in one time or another. About half the veterans of intense combat in World War II would admit they wet themselves one time or another. These are the ones who admit it. One old World War II vet said, hell, Dave, all that proves 80% or what? That's what he said. Happened to him. Well, you know what, percent were liars, not for us to say. Let's go with 20%. No, the number could be higher. But let's ask two questions. Number one, why is the body doing this? You know what? I started 20 years ago work with LAPD SWAT. At that point in time, LAPD SWAT policy was try to give us 20 minutes. Okay, negotiations broken down. Time to go in. Here's your 20-minute warning. What did LAPD SWAT do with that 20 minutes? They call it the battle crap. Anybody will help? It's called stress diarrhea. Well, now there might be explosive stress diarrhea. Not everybody, not every time. Many of them, most of the time, the body did this. Even if you don't lose it, you have what's called the pucker factor. The pucker factor is when one part of your body is trying to hold in, and when another part of your body is trying to eject. Oh, why is the body doing this? Inside every human body is a toxic waste site. It's the core. Think of it like a big, long balloon. You know those big, long balloons? Full of shit. And if you nick it, it will leak out and infect the wound. And prior to modern medication, you're dead. A slow, hideous, horrible death. It's very reasonable for the body to dump that toxic waste. The Greeks used to say your bowels turn to water. And you go from this full balloon to a shriveled up empty balloon. The toxic waste is gone and the target is smaller. Is that not an amazing survival mechanism? So folks, I train my EMS folks and my ER folks, and I said, what ratio of traffic accident victims have messed themselves? The number's all over the map, but it's very, very common. And people are devastated. I mean, lifelong, humiliated, shattered, devastated by it. And I tell them a little psychological first aid goes a long way. Tell them that's your body's natural response. It happens all the time. Don't worry about it. You can literally save someone from a lifetime of shame by simply telling them that's your body's natural response. Don't worry about it. But how do we avoid it? Here's the second question. How do we avoid it? Well, we all agree we'd rather not have it happen. No, we've got the old bucket list. Here it is, the bucket list, 7, 8, 9. Crap myself in fear. No. Not on my list, not on your list. So go get a great big heaping helping of stress inoculation. My cops, I tell my cops that don't want to get this training, that wear this suit and get bit by the dog. And if that dog is so scary in a controlled training environment, you can't do the training. When that junkyard dog comes out of nowhere, walks on your leg, you will mess yourself, you will wet yourself, you will shoot yourself, you will shoot the dog, you will shoot your friends. We do not flee from our fear, we master it. The more it scares us, the more important it is to seek the training. We do not flee from our fear, we master it. So folks, we've hit the point today where the goal is to forewarn you and forearm you about what happens in this life and death event of combat. And if you know what's coming, stress diarrhea ahead of time is pretty common, and stress diarrhea during the incident. But there's something I've heard so many times. I have interviewed so many people, I believe more than anybody in human history. 22 years on the road, talking to people who've been in life and death events every day, emails, the research I did before I retired. And folks, I've had so many people tell me this, that I think we're wired this way. There can be a sudden violent death. The sudden violent death of a family member. The sudden violent death of a fellow law enforcement officer. And your very first response is, oh, that could have been me. Later you look back at yourself, I wish it was me. I would have laid my life down for that person. And my very first thought was a selfish one about myself. I've heard this so many times that I am convinced we're wired this way for a very good reason. You're in an aircraft with a small child, the oxygen mask comes down. What do you do before you put the child's mask on? Put your mask on first. It is a fundamental law of survival. Before you can help anybody else survive, what do you have to do first? Survive yourself. Folks, we didn't become the alpha predator. We didn't claw our way to the top of the food chain with our claws or fangs. The human brain is the most powerful survival machine the world's ever seen. When there's a sudden, violent death, the puppy says, oh, that could have been us. Pay attention. If that ever happens to you, I don't want you to be troubled by it. I want you to be forewarned and forearmed and know there's one. moms, I tell my medical folks, if you've never gone home and hugged your children, you should thank God it wasn't you. The day will probably come when you do, and that's okay too. Yeah. And one other thing, when we talk about use of deadly force, there's a concern our cops and everybody else should have. Well, the number one concern faced with a life and death event, deadly force, begins with an L. Liability, lawsuits, lawyers are going to get sued. Do you understand you can be sued for not shooting? The cop that didn't go in at Parkland, the cop that didn't go in at they're being sued at the Pulse nightclub. Folks, if a cop stands there and does nothing while people are murdered, cowardice, dereliction of duty, deliberate indifference, depraved indifference. You shoot somebody you shouldn't. Hey, it's homicide, negligent, manslaughter. Do you understand? Once you made the decision to use deadly force, you can be damned if you do and damned if you don't. There's only one way out. Straight ahead. Know the law. Know it well. A lot of old cops tell me, don't be afraid of being sued. Everybody gets sued. Just chance for overtime. Be afraid of being successfully sued. Be afraid of being so negligent, so poorly prepared, you do the wrong thing in the moment you. So what's the one thing we can do right now to stack the deck in our favor? The one thing right now to load the dice in our favor. Train. Can we all agree on that? Train. Oh, the other now. Piss on off. Cops, your society has called upon you to use deadly force in defense of innocent lives. It is not to be taken lightly. On you citizens who have accepted the responsibility to carry a weapon, it is not to be taken lightly. Now, folks, I want to make something really clear, and it's important. Here's where the Guardian God's got a really good point. We can't take that warrior model too far. Folks, I trained the Beggar and Reaper squadrons. They've been ordered to kill this terrorist, and if they do not kill him, they have failed in their mission. Cops, citizens, our mission is never to kill. We're shooting to save lives. The moment that person is no longer a lawful threat to others, we'll call the ambulance, try to save their life, their innocent life on the planet. Hollywood bank robbery, probably one of the first major gunfights to be on national TV. Bad guys with body armor rifle versus LAPD. Hundreds of rounds fired. The world watched the bad guys come down, and then they watched LAPD jump on those bodies and apply CPR and try to save their life. Once they are no longer a threat, their life is precious any other life on the planet. We are shooting to save lives. We're shooting because we sincerely believe there's immediate threat, a life will limit grievous bodily harm to self or others. But folks, as a result of what we do, there is a very good chance people will die. And it is not to be taken lightly. Train. If you accept the awful responsibility of carrying a gun, train. And take just a minute to thank God. There are men and women willing to accept that awful responsibility. Because if the day ever comes that nobody's willing to use deadly force, on that day you fold up the flag, you kiss our nation goodbye, and somebody who's willing to kill will take over. Yes? So folks, what I want to do then is walk you through some real nuts and bolts of what's happened to people in life and death defense. I think it might be very useful. Dr. Alexis Hartwell is a police psychologist in Portland, Oregon, and she surveyed 141 officers. Now, this is all on page 55 of Combat Again if you want to follow along. But 141 cops, they know her. She got some very in-depth information immediately after the incident. And folks, 85% had that tremendous sound we talked about. And by the way, hunters, you are still getting hearing loss. The shutout is in the nerve, the ear is still being hammered. Wear hearing protection when you hunt. Maybe a devil weasel like me is a pain in the butt. You understand? But look, 16% had intensified sounds. Even old Buck Simon from Arkansas figured out that adds up to 101%. Sometimes both happens. And every time I've ever seen it, it went like this. You're caught by surprise in an ambush. Boom, boom, boom. Shots overwhelming. You start shooting back, and the shots get muted. The body will focus intensely on the sense it needs most for survival. When you start shooting back, the eyes dial in and the ears dial down. Does that not some amazing stuff about But here's really an important one. Tunnel vision. 80% were conscious of tunnel vision. The actual number might be higher. These are the ones conscious of it. A lot of people talk about looking through a toilet paper tube. Now, when we do our force-on-force simulation type engagements, it's not kill or be killed, it's hurt or be hurt. A lot of people, when they do it the first time, their body treats it like it's real. And the role players who are playing the bad guys in those scenarios, they found in many cases they can sidestep and come right off their radar screen. I submit to you, every draw should have a sidestep built into it. The not sidestep when your draw should be the exception. At least you're a moving target. At best, you can come right off their radar screen. So we can apply these things. And if we are properly trained and prepared, these things are far more likely to happen to him, the bad guy, than it is to us, yes? Look what else is happening here, folks. Autopilot, 74% did what they were trained to do at some point without conscious thought. Is that a good thing? If you're trained to do the right thing, it is. For a century, we had revolvers out of the range. Because we didn't have to clean up the range, we fire 6 shots out of a revolver, put the brass in your hand, put it in your pocket, throw in a brass barrel, reload, and keep going. Pretty clever. Release range as you go. We had case after case where cops sit in the gunfight with a pocket full of brass, had no idea how it got there. You do not rise to the challenge. You sink to the level of your training. Folks, and you got to admire the cop who's willing to share this story with me. He said, me and my partner would do 5 minutes of survival training every day before we hit the street. You do a lot, 5 minutes a day. One defensive tactic move a day, huh? He said, one of the things that we did periodically was weapons takeaway. My kids and my grandkids have learned. We do dart guns and Nerf guns all the time. Never point a gun at Grandpa within arm's reach. It's actually action. You can always snatch their gun on the hand before they pull the trigger. So we practice weapons takeaway. My partner hold the blue gun, take it away, hand it back. 10 reps. I know the gun, take it away, hand it back, 10 reps. So we did that off and on across the years. And one day in a store, come around the corner, someone's robbing the store. Without any warning, guy shot the gun on my face, without conscious thought. Took it away, hand it back. Well, they did it. Think very carefully what we're training people to do. That little admin thing that we throw in is coming out the other end. Now, where we see this autopilot most often is holstering and unholstering without conscious thought. Holstering and unholstering without conscious thought. And slow motion time. I have had hundreds of people tell me they can see the bullet in combat. And it absolutely blows their mind. It's like airsoft. It's thrown for your track your eyes and unbelieve it. On several occasions, they will walk up and point to where the bullet hit. And no way they could have done that. But they weren't tracking the route like they said they were. And folks, some of the temporary paralysis is slow motion time. One case we know for sure. Cop said he shot me in the throat. How long? I don't know. 10, 15 seconds. We have an audio tape of the gunfight. It was a fraction of a second. But the slow motion time could make it feel like forever. So remember how time can be distorted. But here's two critical dynamics that you must understand. 50%, half of all trained, seasoned police officers had memory gaps. For folks, blackouts. You know, 2016 was the single worst year-over-year increase in cops murdered. A lady wrote a book called War on Cops, and she's meant it. But we also have bad guys coming to kill the cop's family. That's the people we're living with, folks, more and more. They don't face you head on, they hit your school, they hit your daycare, they come kill your family. And this is the face of evil that we're fighting. While Mama Bear protecting her cubs can be one of the most dangerous things on the planet. I'm not really a Glock guy, but there's a benefit to a gun that has no safety, right? You just pull the trigger and the bad guy goes away, right? But folks, Mama Bear had a Glock and emptied it into the bad guy, and it was game over. But she said, you know what messed me up? It was eating me alive. I heard the audio recording of my 911 call, and to this day I have no memory of making that call. It was eating me alive. And then somebody gave me a book and said, look, it's in the book. It's normal. Psychologists call it normalizing. And that's all she needed. It's normal. It's okay. But folks, it's so much better to have this stuff ahead of time and to be able to fill in the gaps afterwards. And one other thing that's happening here, 22% just flat remembered something that did not happen. Memory distortions. It was early in the war, one of our Tier 1 Spec Ops medics came up to me after his first combat tour and said, why do the wounded hallucinate so much? Hallucinations. Remember things that did not happen. So folks, just look at these two items. We got the memory loss, the blackouts, and the memory distortions. The state of Texas passed a law last year. A cop has the right to see every video before they make a statement. It's common sense, it's only reasonable, and it's good. The world will hold that cop accountable for that video. And if you do a statement, you have memory gaps, you have memory distortions, then you got to live with that in court. It's the law in Texas, it's common sense and policy everywhere else. But folks, if trained, seasoned cops can have this stuff happen, how much more would it happen to civilians? Folks, we want you to survive physically, spiritually, psychologically, and legally. After you've been in a deadly force incident, as I was in fear for my life, I had to use deadly force, and I want to talk to my lawyer. Those are the magic words. This is not the time to be shooting off your mouth. This is going to be a time when you will be in such psychological and physiological turmoil you cannot believe it. And right now, tell yourself what I'm going to say. This is not the time to shoot off mouth. Folks, law enforcement officers, usually the union lawyer shows up immediately and starts working with their guy from the beginning. How much more so would the same thing be true for us? Please, after you've been in that life and death event, this is not the time to be shooting off your mouth. This is the time to say, as in fear for my life, I use deadly force, and I want to talk to my lawyer. This is a policy for cops. It's reasonable, it's normal, it's completely acceptable. But folks, set aside the fact that somebody's trying to kill you. If you were sitting here right now, blackouts, hallucinations, that would meet every definition of a psychotic episode. Just those who've had the self would scare the daylights out of you. The fact that somebody's trying to kill you is bad enough without your body doing weird and wonderful things. Somebody warned you. But if you've been warned that might happen, then they won't blindside you. Young California Highway Patrol officer, been in my class, he's been forewarned. He and his partner on a stopped a bad guy murdered his partner, he kills a bad guy, applies CPR to his dead partner. Don't get a whole lot more traumatic than that. But he'd been forewarned, he'd been in my class. He said, you cannot imagine how important it was in the middle of the gunfight to know that it was normal for my shots to be so muted. He said, tunnel vision like looking through a soda straw. Autopilot, holstering, unholstering, without conscious thought. It was freaky. And the slow motion time was real, and you had lots of time to think about it. You understand? There's time for the wheels to kind of spin in the middle of all of this. And he said, memory loss. He said, during the debriefings are critically important for many reasons. But he said, during the debriefing, people talked about things I didn't remember. And I was okay with that. And the memory distortions, he said there were one or two things that I remembered and everybody else said, no man, that didn't happen. He said, if I didn't know those memory distortions would happen, I would have spent the rest of my life thinking that they all conspired to lie to me about some goofy little aspect. So it's so important to know these things ahead of time. But it's even more important. You expect crazy things in the heat of battle. When crazy things come out of nowhere, months and weeks later, they can mess you up unless you get warned. But you begin to understand how the simplest things become incredibly difficult under stress. Fine motor controls out, all kinds of other dynamics. So I've always wanted to design and work my own knife. And Ernie Emerson joined me. I just sold the last of our Emerson sheepdog knives. That's our sheepdog knife and gun logo and this Emerson logo. And folks, whatever folder you carry, it has got to have a guard that will stop you down your blade. We think we've hit the epitome of human achievement, and we carry a knife that's going to do more danger to us than the bad guy. Because you will go down on that blade and you will cut up those bits and you'll never put them back together the right way again. Samurai sword, a bowie knife, a keyboard, all has a guard. And so we got that comes around, forms a solid 90-degree guard. And folks, this is a fine motor skill, breaks under stress. This is a gross motor skill, this is pure under stress. And the Emerson has got the patent on the wave deployment system. Even if you fumble that, you've got the flipper to go. But, you know, cops, detectives say if somebody's been stabbed, look at everybody's hands. Because the idiot always goes down the blade, almost always. Somebody's stabbing tires, follow the blood trail. Because the idiot usually cuts themselves. Here we are, we think we're the epitome of human achievement. And we walk out the door with a knife that if you try to stab anything, it'll do great harm, yes? And if it gets under stress, the simple things can become incredibly difficult. And my son and I have a gun business, sheepdog knife and gun. And sheepdogknifeandgun.com. And what we've done is we've got half a dozen patents. And we patented some of this stuff. You can go online and look at our stuff, sheepdogknifeandgun.com. But one of the items that we have, and by the way, what we did, we bought the last 70 Daytonics, famous 1911 Daytonics. We bought the last 70 slides and frames. Every one of them has been handcrafted and hand-mastered, and we got the enhanced slide pulls. Under stress, racking that slide becomes very difficult. Your hands get wet or bloody, the weapon gets wet or oily, racking that slide becomes incredibly difficult. The enhanced slide pulls quintuple your hand strength. A couple of other things we got in there. Folks, we're selling the first half dozen of these. We're barely putting out a half dozen a month. Full-time labor. We're one gunsmith, master gunsmith, my son John Grossman. Barely put out 6 a month, handcrafted. And the first half dozen getting off the ground, we're selling under 2,000. Everywhere else on the planet, this is a $4,000 gun. And we've also got our patented devices on there. An incredible collectible, instant collectibles, got our sheepdog knife and gun logo, it's got the Daytonics logo. But it's all about finding hardware that works with the software. To understand how the body works, and then have tools that will help us with that. So folks, when we expect crazy things in the heat of battle, we prepare for them, we build hardware that will work with the software that we know is coming. But you expect crazy things in the heat of battle. When months later something comes out of the blue and scares the daylights out of you unless you can warn. So when you were a kid, how many times did you have to touch a hot stove? Hot stove, how many times? Just once, unless you're from Arkansas, or destined to be a paratrooper. Just once, yeah? And you touch that hot stove, your heart rate skyrockets, the four-bang shuts down, and the puppy blows a hole through the screen door. That little dog lives out in the front yard, punch hole the screen door, grabs you by the throat, pees in your lap, said, don't ever touch that stove again. Doesn't work. It's called one-trial learning. Whenever there's fear and pain associated with learning, a powerful neural network, a network of neurons is established. If you think a neural pathway was established with touching a hot stove, how much greater might be in combat? Arkansas State Trooper, first gunfight, bad guy's down, he's alive. Happy ending to the story. He says, a week after my first gunfight, I'm sitting up in the bleachers with my wife watching our daughter at a swim meet. What do you suppose pushed this guy's button? His daughter's gun went off when I didn't expect it. Boom! My heart is pounding, gasping for air, drenched with sweat. His wife thought he's having a heart attack. Thought her cerebral panic attack, little mild anxiety attack, basically the same thing, the puppy's coming for a visit. Now folks, listen to me. This is not PTSD. It's normal. The DSM tells us when you re-experience the event and then try to not think about it, you will literally drive yourself crazy trying to not think about it. You got to make peace with the memory. You got to separate the memory from the emotions. And the tool we're going to use, Alicia and the puppy, is the breathing exercise. A swig of water is better, but you don't always have a swig of water. You can always stop and take a breath. But folks, just having that puppy come to visit is normal. It's how you deal with it. You know, do a lot of work in Canada. And Edmonton, police service in Canada has really pioneered in North America what they call critical incident reintegration program. They got somebody that's been in combat in a deadly force incident. You know where people go to qualify a month later and they pull the trigger and the puppy's all over them. And they think they're broken. They're not broken, but they need a little help at that point. So folks, what they do is when they're good and ready, they come out to the range and you smell it. And whether you know it or not, you can actually feel it. Those little concussions. Those are two very primal senses, smell and touch. And then, when they're good and ready, they do a little dry fire, a little sub-cal fire, work up to the real thing. Now, Officer Greg Stevens, qualified a week later, absolutely no problem. But some people come back from our combat tour and pull that trigger, and the puppy's all over them, and they need some help. It's no big deal, it's normal, but at that point in time, they need our help. So folks, let me give you an example of some people who were forewarned. Again, trained so many of our troops going back and forth from the war across the years. And a Marine battalion gave me a great feedback loop. I trained a Marine battalion, they went to Iraq, they saw a lot of combat, they came home. And a young Marine was telling me, he said, we were sitting, talking over beer, and we got talking about the puppy come for a visit. Again, talking over beer can be pretty healthy. Whiskey's made for sipping, wine's made for sipping, beer is made for going. Yeah? And you're talking over beer, and you start to lose it. What do? Stop. Mix for your beer, regain control, and keep talking. Physiologically speaking, psychologically speaking, just about one of the best things you could possibly do until you get drunk, and then it's kind of counterproductive. So she said, me and Marine buddies talking over beer, and we got talking about the puppy coming for a visit. He said, one of my buddies said it happened to me. Real common. He said, I've been home for less than a week. Old dark 3 in the morning. Dead asleep in bed with my wife. And they emptied the dumpster right outside our apartment window. He said, I wake up out of the dead sleep, heart pounding, roll up the bed, hit the deck, scrambling under the bed for a rifle I'm going to stop there. And I come up, confront my wife armed with my slippers. We laughed, man, swig of beer. He said, one of my buddies said to me, another real compliment. He said, I've been home for a couple of weeks. I'm walking down a busy city sidewalk with a wife and kids. Heavy traffic in the street, cars parked by the curb, I'm by the curb, wife and kids, something backfires loud. No more. Boom! Next thing I know, I'm in the gutter, under a car. I look up, there's the wife and kids. Ah, it's okay. This is normal. Let's leave the Marines aside for just a second. We'll come to those who are just a second. The almost identical case. A young soldier told me, he said, I've been home for like a day. With my little 3-year-old boy, car backfires, I hit the drain. I look up, there's my little boy, look with the eyes that big. He said, I got on my knees, put my hand on the little boy's shoulder. He said, those are called combat reflexes. They can't get you alive in combat. It'll take a while for that to go away. For next month, any loud noise, boom, the kids hitting the dirt. All the neighborhood kids, boom, they're all hitting the dirt. So go back to our Marines, right? Go back to the Marines. We laughed, we had a swig of beer. Then he said, one of my buddies said something really important. He said, you know, if we hadn't been warned this might happen, we wouldn't be laughing. If we hadn't been warned this might happen, we wouldn't be laughing. Laughter can be cruel, laughter inappropriate. But most of the time, laughter is very healthy. It says this has no power over me. So my son deploys to his first combat tour, the Invasion of Afghanistan. Can I tell you a quick story about him? You know, 9 combat tours, all of them attached to a Special Forces A team. It's an Air Force combat controller. FAA certified air traffic controller, scuba halo trained. They attached to their spec ops units in the maestro of the air. But his first tour, the Invasion of Afghanistan, he's talked to the German Tier 1 spec ops, calling in airstrikes and all the other stuff to the German Tier 1 spec ops. And he 6 months they rotate out, 6 months into the war, and the Germans put him in for a German award for combat valor, kind of like a Bronze Star. And a colonel from the German embassy, he comes and presents the award, and he said, to our knowledge, You are the first American to ever receive a German award for combat valor. Because you bastards are always on the inside. You see, we're on the same side for once. They don't stand a chance. Yeah. So my boy comes home from first combat tour now. He grew up with this stuff. The book I literally wrote for my kid going into the fight. The early draft of this book. And he grew up with this stuff, talking over the dinner table with veterans. So he's back in his old bedroom, home on leave, and while Big Brother was deployed, Little Brother puts a poster of Yoda on the outside of Little Brother's bedroom door. Big Brother gets through the night and sees Yoda. Whatever reason, sees the bad guy. Heart pounding, goes for his gun, realizes it's Yoda. No big deal, he uses breathing. Back to bed. The next morning, at breakfast, said, Dad, the puppy came for a visit, just like we talked about. Got up the night, saw Yoda, saw a bad guy, heart pounding, went for my gun. Realized it's Yoda, used my breathing, back to bed, just like we talked about. He turns to Little Brother. He said, you know, while I'm home, take Yoda down. Little Brother puts Yoda in Big Brother's closet. It was sincerely funny. What's next? And we could laugh about it. And it was so healthy. It was so good to be able to laugh about it. But it scares the daylights out of you. Think how we might have responded if we hadn't been warned. Folks, we can fill in the gaps with this stuff afterwards. It's so much better to have it ahead of time. Handful of vaccines with a carload of antibiotics. We want to be vaccinated. We want to have people forewarned and forearmed. And so, folks, the tool we're going to use to leash in that puppy is a breathing exercise. It is not enough to teach how to breathe. I've got to explain to you how and why it works. Then you'll learn. So for our purpose right now, divide your body into two parts. The conscious and the unconscious, right? And by the way, this says both sympathetic and parasympathetic in here. This says fight or flight and rest and digest. It's under one pile. So folks, what are some of the things in your body you can't control? Heart rate, blood pressure, digestion. What do you think? You control those things? You never know if you never try. Right now, everybody give your best shot. Raise your heart rate 180 beats per minute. Raise your blood pressure. Everybody. Give us some good stress diarrhea. Ready? You know that you could. But those are fight or flight responses. Those are things the puppy does. Your mind divides into things you control, the conscious. The thing the puppy controls, the unconscious. But what is one biological mechanism? It could go either way. You're breathing, sure. Your breathing right now is not under conscious control. If you had a conscious to control your breathing, when you sleep, you die. But you better take a deep breath in through the nose. Breathe in, breathe in, breathe in. Hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it. Let it out, let it out, let it out, let it out. Hold it, hold it. What did you just do? You pulled your breathing from unconscious to conscious control. You can control your heart rate. You can control your blood pressure if you control your breathing. For $20 on Amazon.com, a little finger clip gives you heart rate. Sit there watching TV and hyperventilate. Just fast, shallow breaths, fast, like heart rate way up. Long, slow breaths, bring it down. Bring it up, bring it down. The other day, going for a colonoscopy. That's where they shove a camera up your tail. And I'm wired for sound. I'm sitting here. My heart rate and my blood pressure. I thought, this is so cool. Roll my blood pressure up, run it down, run it up, run it down. My wife is smacking me. Stop that, stop that. So I go to the dentist's office. The little dentist said, take my blood pressure. I said, oh, that's a little high for me. Hold on a second. Just take one breath, relax every muscle, try it now. Whoa. Nobody can consciously control their blood pressure. Anybody can consciously control your blood pressure if you control the breathing. You understand? The breathing is a bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind. It's a leash on the puppy. Now, in my notes, in my office, I have hundreds and hundreds of case studies organized by topic. Of all the topics, the breathing is far and away the biggest file. It's saved the most lives, it's made the most difference. And folks, you understand why the breathing works. But folks, we're using the breathing before the life and death event. LAPD, SWAT, FBI, HRT, both tell me they stacked up outside the door. Bag it unloaded, that they got a second. What's the last thing to do before they go in that door? They go in that door in condition yellow, calm, competent professionals. Anything goes wrong, proper bread, rock and roll, come back down again. But they go in that door too excited. They go in that door in a mid to high condition red. Anything goes wrong, where are they going? Straight to black. We're usually breathing before the event, we're using it during the event. A West Virginia state trooper came up to me. He said, of all the tens of thousands of people you walk past in a lifetime, one of them draws a gun and tries to kill you. He said, I admit, this guy caught me completely flat-footed. He just pulls a gun and starts shooting. I went straight to condition black, yanked my gun out, spraying and praying. He said, the only good news is the bad guy's an even worse shot than I was. He said, I dumped a magazine, my slide locked back, I'm completely out of control. And I did exactly what I was trained to do. Went to cover, did a magazine change. Got cover, go to cover. Don't have cover, sidestep, do a magazine change. I went to cover, did a mag change, go to pop out. I thought, wait a minute, he ain't going nowhere. I got time for a free throw, I got time for a free throw. He said, all it took was one breath. Front sight, game over. Front sight press, one of the best shots I've ever made in my life. He says, I accomplished more with one breath and one careful shot than spraying a magazine. So we're using the breathing before the event, during the event, and when? After the event. For the rest of your life. If the puppy's coming for a visit, the anger's welling up, the fear is welling up. You don't breathe, you let it happen. You have a leash on the puppy. You must make a conscious decision to use that leash. Here's the key. Here's the heart of it. Focus. Controlling fear in combat, controlling fear after combat is the same skill. Just the only one you might have to do it. What's courage on the battlefield? Is courage the absence of fear? Oh no. Almost everybody in combat is very afraid. Few people under few circumstances are just too busy to be afraid. But over the long haul, everybody is afraid in combat. And remember General Patton? Patton said, any man that never afraid in combat is a damn liar. Patton also said, if courage is the absence of fear, then I have never met a courageous man. Courage is controlling your fear. It breaks my heart to see brave men and women, strong men and women, they'll be brave in the incident, and they're blindsided later because nobody warned them they might let them be brave later. Do you understand? So the breathing works in the event and after the event. Now, a couple of key things on this breathing, folks. This is combat breathing, tactical breathing. Don't close your eyes. We do the force-on-force engagements, and people go to breathe, and they close their eyes. Don't close your eyes. That's what we call a training scar. Some people are taught breathing before you close your eyes. Don't roll your head back like this. You're not going to do that in combat. But unscrew the natural stress of the conscience. Newborn baby has that response. Head goes down, shoulders come up, pull the head back. Pull the shoulders back. And when you breathe, try to fill the lungs absolutely full. Fill the lungs to fill completely full. You have to relax the stomach and let the diaphragm push it out of the way. Let that old Twinkie tumor just hang out there. All right. Mom ever tell you, coach ever tell you, calm down, take a deep breath? Mom ever should talk about it. We're going to breathe in through the nose for 4 count, hold for 4 count, out through the lips for 4 count, hold for 4 count, again and again. Sometimes called square breathing, 4, 4, 4. Everybody ready? All right. Eyes open, head back, shoulders back, fill the lungs all the way. Here we go. In through the nose, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Out through the lips, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. In through the nose, deep, 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 hold, 2, 3, 4. Out through the lips, deep, 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 hold, 2, 3, 4. In through the nose, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Out through the lips, 2, 3, 4, the true revolution. Attitude is contagious. Can panic be contagious? Can calm be contagious? And our job is to be the rock of calm. When all about you lose theirs, lay it on you. And you can and must remind other people to breathe at the moment of need. So folks, they're teaching this to little kids now. I'm talking 3 years old. And I'll tell you how the docs do it. I did it with my grandkids. But the doc takes a scented plastic flower. I just went outside and plucked a flower. And a candle. The doc lights the candle and models the behavior. Smelling the flower. Enjoy it. Blow out the candle. Watch the smoke. Now you do it. That passion is a 3-year-old breathing on command. And so, folks, it's really a valuable thing to give to kids at a young age. And I would tell a bunch of cops in Florida about this. And a cop told me, he said, our little 4-year-old daughter is getting hysteria responses, just all worked up, holding her breath, freaking us out. The doc said, no big deal, she'll outgrow it, can't do it. I'm going to show you something. Right there, in 2 minutes flat, the doc's got a little girl breathing on command. The smelling the flower, enjoy it, blow out the candle, watch the smoke. He said it's wild. She starts getting worked up, remind her to breathe, it pulls her right out of it. So he said one day we're driving in traffic, just me and my little girl in the back seat, in the kid's seat, and I'm having a bad day. Somebody cuts me off in traffic. I'm leaning out the window, shaking my fist, screaming at this guy. From the back seat, hear my daughter say, breathe, Daddy, breathe. He said, you know what? It worked. It worked. Sometimes we all need that little reminder. Well, folks, it's the top of the hour, the final hour, just a little bit less. We're going to put together the most important pieces of all and tie everything together. Some great case studies I think will be of value. For one last 10-minute break. I'm going to slide out of here fairly soon when it's over. I just had my conjugal visit. Clint Hunter was waiting for me. A little bit of time for Jim to roll back in there, and you've got to hear what he's got going on. It's dynamite stuff. Might be able to wrap it up a little early because I would like to catch part of what he's got to do. But Mickey, big hands on the 12. Let's be back in that seat from the big hands on the 2. You're almost down, happy levels up. You need anything from me this last hour, this last break would be a good time to do it.